In the history of the Super Bowl era, certain defenses didn't just stop opponents, they terrified them. They controlled games, dictated tempo, and in some cases, carried their teams all the way to football immortality. But what truly makes a defense great? It's more than just stats. It's about dominance, intimidation, and the ability to rise when it mattered most in the postseason. From the Steel Curtain to the Legion of Boom, from Buddy Ryan's 46 defense to Ray Lewis's Wrecking Crew, these are the top 10 defenses of the Super Bowl era. This was the year the Big Blue Wrecking Crew stormed the NFL, a defense masterminded by Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick, and led by a force of nature named Lawrence Taylor. He wasn't just rushing the passer, he was wrecking entire game plans before the ball was even snapped. But Taylor wasn't alone. The Giants' defense was stacked with stars. Harry Carson, the steady veteran and emotional leader in the middle, Carl Banks, one of the most underrated outside linebackers of the decade, and Leonard Marshall, a disruptive defensive lineman who brought constant pressure up front. Together, they formed one of the most intimidating front sevens football has ever seen. The regular season showed their dominance, a 14-2 record, with the defense ranking second in the NFL in points allowed. But it was the postseason where they became legendary. In the divisional round, they dismantled the San Francisco 49ers 49-3, knocking Joe Montana out of the game with a brutal Leonard Marshall hit. In the NFC Championship, they shut out Washington 17-0, holding the high-powered Redskins offense to just 150 total yards. And in Super Bowl 21, they overwhelmed John Elway and the Denver Broncos. After a tight first half, the Giants' defense slammed the door, allowing just 10 points the rest of the way as New York rolled to a 39-20 victory. At number 9, the 2008 Pittsburgh Steelers. By this time, the Steel Curtain dynasty of the 1970s was a distant memory. But in 2008, a new generation of Steelers revived that same ferocity and carried Pittsburgh to a Super Bowl championship. Statistically, they were unmatched in the modern era. This defense allowed just 13.9 points per game, best in the NFL, and gave up fewer than 237 yards per game, almost 40 yards better than the next closest team. No opponent topped 300 yards of offense until late November. The identity of this unit was pressure. James Harrison, the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, brought relentless edge speed and power. On the other side, Lamar Woodley was nearly as dangerous, giving Pittsburgh two bookend pass rushers who terrorized quarterbacks all season. Behind them stood one of the smartest and most feared safeties of his generation, Troy Polamalu. With his instincts, range, and signature leaping plays, Polamalu turned big moments into highlights, and highlights into heartbreak for opposing offenses. Anchoring the front was Casey Hampton, while veterans like Aaron Smith and Brett Keisel brought grit and consistency. Add in Ike Taylor at corner, and this was a defense with no real weakness. In the postseason, they proved it. In the AFC Championship, Polamalu sealed the game against Baltimore with a 40-yard pick six that sent Pittsburgh to the Super Bowl. And in Super Bowl 43, the defense left its stamp on NFL history. That single moment swung momentum and etched this defense into immortality. At number 8, the 2015 Denver Broncos. They called themselves the no-fly zone. With Aqib Talib, Chris Harris Jr., and Bradley Roby locking down receivers, and safeties T.J. Ward and Darian Stewart patrolling the back end, throwing the ball against Denver was almost a losing proposition before the snap. But the secondary was only part of the nightmare. Up front, the pass rush was devastating. Von Miller was at the peak of his powers. Lightning off the edge, a blur that quarterbacks couldn't escape. Paired with veteran DeMarcus Ware, the Broncos had two game wreckers who dictated blocking schemes and forced constant mistakes. The numbers told the story. Denver led the league in total defense, pass defense, and sacks. They allowed just 18.5 points per game. In the AFC Championship, they punished Tom Brady, hitting him 20 times and forcing 2 interceptions in a 20-18 slugfest. Then came Super Bowl 50, in a performance for the ages. Facing MVP Cam Newton and the 15-1 Carolina Panthers, the Broncos didn't just win, they dismantled one of the most dynamic offenses of the decade. Von Miller sacked Newton 2.5 times, forced 2 fumbles, and earned Super Bowl MVP honors. The Broncos' defense scored 1 touchdown, set up another, and smothered Carolina from start to finish in a 24-10 victory. This might be the most unusual defense on our list, Because unlike many of the others, the 91 Eagles didn't ride their dominance to a Super Bowl. But when it comes to pure numbers and talent, this unit belongs among the very best of the Super Bowl era. The heart of this defense was one of the most feared players in NFL history. Reggie White, the Minister of Defense. White was unstoppable, a combination of strength, speed, and technique that allowed him to bulldoze offensive linemen and terrorize quarterbacks. Lining up next to him was Jerome Brown, a Pro Bowl defensive tackle whose power and disruption made running between the tackles nearly impossible. Add in Clyde Simmons off the edge, and the Eagles' defensive line was a nightmare that few teams could even block. Behind them, the linebacker core was led by Seth Joyner and Byron Evans, both versatile, physical, and relentless. And the secondary featured playmakers like Eric Allen, a future All-Pro corner who locked down receivers and thrived in big moments. In 1991, the Eagles finished first in total defense, first in rush defense, and first in pass defense. That's a triple crown almost unheard of in NFL history. Opponents averaged just 3 yards per rush, and Philadelphia led the league in sacks with 55. While they didn't get the playoff run that their dominance deserved, the 1991 Eagles remain a legendary example of defensive greatness. At number 6, the 1972 Miami Dolphins. When most fans think of the '72 Dolphins, they remember perfection. The NFL's only undefeated season, 17-0, capped by a Super Bowl victory. Led by coordinator Bill Arnsparger, the Dolphins played with precision and discipline. They didn't have the headline-grabbing stars of the Bears or the Ravens, but what they had was unity. Every player executed his assignment with machine-like consistency, and together they strangled opponents all year long. The heart of the unit was linebacker Nick Buonaconti, the cerebral leader who kept everyone aligned. Around him, Manny Fernandez dominated at defensive tackle, while Bill Stanfill provided pass rush off the edge. In the secondary, Jake Scott and Dick Anderson formed one of the best safety tandems of the decade, with Scott earning Super Bowl MVP honors. The results were undeniable. Miami allowed just 12.2 points per game, best in the league. They held opponents under 200 passing yards in nearly every game, and they thrived in clutch moments. In Super Bowl VII, the Dolphins held Washington to just 7 points, preserving the perfect season and completing football's greatest achievement. At number 5, the 2013 Seattle Seahawks. This defense was bold, brash, and downright suffocating. They called themselves the Legion of Boom, and for one unforgettable season, they reigned over the NFL with a combination of swagger, physicality, and sheer dominance. The secondary was the backbone. Richard Sherman was the shutdown corner, fearless and vocal, challenging the league's best receivers. Earl Thomas patrolled center field with unmatched range, erasing deep threats before they had a chance. And Cam Chancellor was the enforcer, lowering the boom on anyone who dared cross the middle. But the Legion of Boom wasn't just about the back end. Up front, Seattle had a deep rotation of pass rushers. Michael Bennett, Cliff Avril, and Chris Clemens relentlessly pressured quarterbacks, while Bobby Wagner emerged as the heartbeat of the linebacker corps, fast and instinctive in the middle. Statistically, the Seahawks were unmatched in 2013. They finished first in points allowed, first in yards allowed, and first in takeaways. No team had accomplished that triple crown since the 1985 Chicago Bears. They forced 39 turnovers and held opponents to just 14.4 points per game. And then came the moment that cemented their legacy, Super Bowl 48. Facing Peyton Manning's Denver Broncos, the highest-scoring offense in NFL history, the Seahawks didn't just win, they humiliated them. Seattle picked off Manning twice, forced 4 turnovers, and limited Denver to a single touchdown in a 43-8 rout. At number 4, the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This defense wasn't just great, it was fast, violent, and perfectly built for the modern passing game. It started up front with Warren Sapp, the Hall of Fame defensive tackle who wrecked offensive lines from the inside. His quick first step and relentless motor made him nearly unblockable. On the outside, Simeon Rice provided the speed rush, piling up double-digit sacks and collapsing pockets from the edge. At linebacker, the leader was Derek Brooks, the heart and soul of the defense. Smart, instinctive, and lightning fast, Brooks could shut down the run, blanket tight ends, and jump passing lanes. He was joined by Shelton Quarles and Hardy Nickerson, creating one of the most versatile linebacking groups in football. In the secondary, the Bucs had 2 enforcers, John Lynch, a hard-hitting safety who set the tone with punishing tackles, and Ron Barber, a crafty cornerback whose instincts and blitzing ability made him a nightmare for quarterbacks. Together, this group formed the blueprint of the Tampa 2 defense, a scheme that emphasized speed, zone coverage, and gang tackling. And in 2002, it was executed to perfection. The Bucs allowed just 12.3 points per game, led the NFL in interceptions with 31, and held opposing quarterbacks to a passer rating of only 48.4. And in the postseason, they took their dominance to another level. In the NFC Championship, they finally exercised their demons in Philadelphia, shutting down the Eagles' offense in the final game ever played at Veterans Stadium. Then came Super Bowl 37. Facing John Gruden's old team, the high-powered Oakland Raiders, the Buccaneers turned the biggest stage into a defensive showcase. At number 3, the 1976 Pittsburgh Steelers. The steel curtain of the 1970s was already legendary, but in 1976, they reached their absolute peak, a level of defensive dominance that even today feels almost impossible. After starting the season 1-4, the Steelers' defense simply slammed the door on the rest of the league. Over the final 9 regular season games, they allowed just 28 total points. That's barely more than 3 points per game. In 5 of those 9 games, their opponents didn't score a single point. This was a defense stacked with Hall of Famers. Mean Joe Green was the anchor, a disruptive force in the middle who defined intimidation. Jack Lambert, fiery and fearless, was the enforcer at linebacker. Jack Ham brought speed, instincts, and coverage ability that made him one of the greatest outside linebackers in history. And in the secondary, Mel Blount was dominant at cornerback. The results were staggering. Pittsburgh finished the year first in total defense, first in rushing defense, and first in scoring defense. Opponents averaged less than 170 yards per game against them, and most games were over before they began. In the playoffs, the defense kept rolling. They shut out the Baltimore Colts 40-14, with the Colts' only points coming after turnovers. Without offensive support, even this all-time great defense couldn't carry them back to the Super Bowl. Still, the 1976 Steelers remain one of the most fearsome units in NFL history. At number 2, the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. If there was ever a defense that could carry a team with no offense at all, it was this one. The 2000 Ravens didn't just stop opponents. They smothered them into submission week after week, all the way to a Super Bowl title. The numbers are jaw-dropping. Baltimore allowed just 165 total points across 16 games. That's barely 10 points per game, the fewest in modern NFL history. They pitched 4 shutouts, forced 49 turnovers, and held opposing offenses without a touchdown in 5 different games. At the center of it all was Ray Lewis, the emotional leader and heart of the unit. His speed, instincts, and ferocity made him the ultimate middle linebacker, a player who set the tone for every snap. Around him, the Ravens were loaded. Tony Siragusa and Sam Adams clogged the middle, making it nearly impossible to run. Peter Boulware and Michael McCrary provided relentless edge pressure, and in the secondary, Rod Woodson, Chris McAllister, and Dwayne Starks shut down passing lanes. In the divisional round, they shut down the Tennessee Titans, turning the game with a blocked field goal returned for a touchdown. In the AFC Championship, they smothered the Raiders, holding them scoreless after the first quarter. And in Super Bowl 35, they produced one of the greatest defensive performances the big game has ever seen. The Ravens won 34-7, with the Giants' only points coming on a kickoff return. At number 1, the 1985 Chicago Bears. The architect was Buddy Ryan, the fiery defensive coordinator who created the 46 defense, a scheme that overwhelmed offenses with relentless pressure, forcing mistakes before plays could even develop. At the heart of it all was Mike Singletary, the middle linebacker whose piercing eyes and field command made him the true quarterback of the defense. Around him, the Bears were loaded with talent. Richard Dent, the pass-rushing terror who finished with 17 sacks and earned Super Bowl MVP honors. Dan Hampton, the versatile lineman who could dominate inside or outside. Steve McMichael, the relentless grinder who gave the front four its nasty edge. Wilbur Marshall and Otis Wilson, 2 ferocious outside linebackers who brought speed, power, and constant pressure from the edges, completing a linebacker trio that overwhelmed blocking schemes. And in the secondary, Gary Fensick and Dave Duerson, a hard-hitting safety tandem that made receivers think twice before venturing across the middle. The results were staggering. Chicago allowed just 198 points all season, an average of 12.4 per game. They forced 54 turnovers, sacked quarterbacks 64 times, and held opponents under 10 points in 11 different games. But the postseason is where the legend was cemented. In the divisional round, they blanked the Giants 21-0. In the NFC Championship, they humiliated the Los Angeles Rams 24-0. That's back-to-back playoff shutouts. Then came Super Bowl 20. Facing the New England Patriots, the Bears delivered one of the most lopsided defensive performances in championship history. They recorded 7 sacks, forced 6 turnovers, and allowed just 7 rushing yards the entire game. The final score, 46-10. And there it is, 10 defenses that defined the Super Bowl era. Who do you think belongs on this list? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let the debate begin. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this countdown, hit that like button, subscribe for more Shy Sports Legends,